Greetings, everyone. Welcome to our exclusive Global Leading Voices webinar campaign. We are delighted to have you join us here today. Please be informed that if you have any questions during the presentation, you may type them into the question box in your control panel. The presenter will answer your questions at the end of the presentation accordingly. Now, without further ado, we will turn the time over to our presenter, who will begin shortly.
Good morning, everybody, or I guess afternoon. It's morning where I am. So we're going to talk about a question that I get asked all the time. How do I become an ethical hacker or a penetration tester, or more simply, how do I do what you do, is what people ask me. As a matter of fact, I just spent 2 days teaching a class where that was the goal, was to teach people how to do this. So PECB asked me to discuss it, and I think it's a good idea. So before we get really started, I want to throw out there a little bit about myself. I am the founder and CEO of Secure Ideas. We're a security consulting firm here in Jacksonville, Florida. I'm also an IANSand faculty member, and I'm the co-chapter lead with Larry Franklin of the Jacksonville OWASP chapter. I've been a nerd for a very long time. I like to say that the guy who used to take my lunch money still does, but he makes a dang good Subway sandwich. I've been involved in lots of things. I started in IT back in '91 and have done development and administration and what have you, steady since then. About, I don't know, 15, 16, geez, a little longer than that now. I'm getting old. Almost 20 years ago, I got involved in security. And the reason I got involved in security is a company I worked for got hacked. And I got mad. I was the system admin. I was responsible for these servers. And some jerk dared to get into the system and do stuff without my permission. How dare he? And I remember going home and talking to my wife and saying to her, this is horrible. I don't know what they did, but it's never going to happen again. Within the next 6 months, we were hacked again. So I wasn't good at that. But from that, I started to learn, and I started to focus and figure out what was going on and how it happened and whatever. Excuse me, I'm very sorry. And I have followed this path, and it's actually a path that I recommend. It's the path I think people should take to do what I do, and there's a number of reasons for that. I also, just as an aside, I'm a member of the 501st Legion. The 501st Legion is a costuming group that raises money for charities. Basically, my wife says it's the nerdiest thing ever. I work with others to build screen-accurate Star Wars costumes, wear them, and raise money. So, like, for example, you'll see the picture there. That's me in a Darth Vader costume. And what they do is they brought a whole bunch of blind kids together, and then they let the blind kids feel what the costumes look like. It was awe-inspiring. I don't know another way to put it. It was just amazing to do it, and I was privileged to be able to do that with friends while we got to do that. So let's get started. I don't think that it's necessary to really say this, but it is important, right? Security is growing. Security has become a focus. People are starting to pay more attention to it. They're starting to realize they have to do something. And I'll be honest, it's 2018. I'm bothered by the fact that we, excuse me, that we are just now really seeing a lot of companies pay attention to this. We've always known, right? I don't think anybody thinks security hasn't been a topic before, and I don't think anybody believes that that there aren't groups that took it seriously. But what we realize is that people knew it was important, but didn't think it was their job, right? Attacks are getting more common. Not only are they getting more common, we're hearing more about them, right? And some of that is notification laws, right? Used to be possible, for example, in the story I told at the beginning, the company I worked for, when they got hacked, they didn't have to tell anybody. There was no law in 1998, 99 that said you have to tell people if you're hacked. You have to tell your customers. You have to tell the world, and that's changed, right? In most parts of the world, notification of some type has to happen, whether it's required by law, contract, regulate, whatever, right? You have to notify. You have to start telling people. So I think that's part of the reason why we're hearing more about it. We also are seeing a lot more laws and regulations around security that are driving this to say, hey, we have to think about this. We have to do this. We have we have to meet at least some level of standard. PCI is one that I always laugh at because I refer to it as the "you must be this tall to ride the internet" rule. PCI, it's a baseline. We have things like GDPR. We have things like FERPA and SOX and HIPAA and all of these different things everywhere, right? This is not a US thing or a Europe thing or a whatever thing. This is a technology thing. We have to pay attention because we don't want to be on this list, right? And this is just an example of some of the organizations that have been compromised recently, some organizations that have been attacked. And I want to be very clear, right? If we're looking at companies like Equifax and organizations like the Securities and Exchange Commission, if they can't get it right, if they can't prevent an attacker from getting into their organization, from compromising their systems, stealing data, and messing things up, how can we? Right? How can we expect organizations the size of Secure Ideas? Look, we're 20 people. And don't get me wrong, we're a security company. So I'd like to believe that we understand security better than your average bear, right? But the reality is we're 20 people. How big is your organization, right? How many people do you have dedicated to security? And let's be honest. No organization out there, none of these on this list, none of the ones of the attendees to this webcast are in business to be secure. We're not, right? We're in business to do business, whatever that business is, right? Being secure is a nice to have. It's a competitive feature. It's something we should just do. But nobody can say at the end of the year or the end of the quarter or whatever, I made more money because I was secure. We can't say that we serviced our job better because we were secure. We can't say our customers got the service of us being secure. Now, we can say we helped our customers better because we were secure. We can say we were able to do our business because we were secure. Right? That's where this boils down to. This is the idea of why this becomes important. So what do we do, right? I mean, we could always just be Hacker Man. I've always liked that image. Sorry. But how do we understand what's going on? How do we deal with what's happening? And I think it's actually pretty simple, right? The first step, and I say simple, right? The first step is we have to understand our risks. We have to know what is really our concern, right? I talk to people all the time. I speak around the country. I present regularly, and I talk to organizations, my customers and others, where it's like, hey, do you really know what you're worried about, right? Like we know, oh my gosh, I don't want to be hacked. But what does that mean, right? I don't want to be hacked. Okay, I can agree with that. I can agree that I don't want to be hacked, right? But what is your biggest concern? What is your worry, right? Think about your organization. Think about your life, yourself, your family, your friends. what is the worst thing that could happen? What is, from a technology perspective, from a security perspective, what is it that you're afraid somebody can get access to, right? And sometimes that's obvious. Sometimes it's really simple. If I was a bank, I can say, you know what? My biggest risk is that somebody could come in and take money from my customers. Okay, that's a bad thing, right? But if you were a greeting card company, is your biggest risk that people can take money from your customers? No. Your biggest risk is that somebody could potentially, I don't know, right? But I'm thinking my biggest risk is that somebody could come in and take the artwork or the little trite sayings we put in the cards before we publish them, right? And then that way they beat us to market. Or maybe it's that they could come in and take access to our distribution list, like who distributes our cards and our prices that we give them so that they can compete, right? It gives them a leg up on us because they could go to those distributors and offer them a lower price to undercut us in the market, right? And the reason I talk about this is if you don't understand what your actual risk is, what you're actually worried about from a business perspective, then the next step doesn't matter. The next step is just a checkbox, and the next step is testing yourself. There's lots of compliance requirements for us to test ourselves, right? PCI, when we'll pick on that. PCI requires us to do a penetration test of our organization at least once a year. It requires us to do regular scanning of our systems to understand what vulnerabilities we have, what weaknesses we have in our security posture. But the reality is that if we don't understand our actual risk, if we don't actually understand what we're worried about an attacker getting to, doing that testing is just a checkbox. All that we're doing is saying, we tested. But what we want to do is we want to test ourselves based on that risk, based on that worry. So if your worry is you're a bank and you're worried that people are going to get access to your customers' money, well then test and focus and ensure that you're assessing the systems that have access to take money from your customers. If you're the greeting card company and you're worried about somebody getting access to your artwork and your trite sayings, then test and focus the assessment on the stuff that has access to your artwork and the trite sayings, right? That's why we have to do that. But we have to be able to test ourselves. And let's be blunt. I'm a consultant. I'm a greedy capitalist. My goal is to convince you that the only way to test yourself is to hire a company like Secure Ideas. But that's not true. You can do it yourself. You can be your own hacker, right? You can assess yourself. Now, before I get into the steps and process to get there, which is going to be the bulk of this presentation, I want to just point out and make sure that it's very, very clear that you have to have permission to do this. You have to make sure that before you go out and test something, that you understand and know and have been authorized by somebody who has the authority to authorize you in testing, right? But a lot of people make this mistake. They get really interested in being an ethical hacker, and let's be clear that the first word there is ethical, right? And that they jump right in with both feet and they're like, yes, oh, this is awesome, I get to hack stuff, and they cross a line. Crossing that line, doing this without permission, can get you charged and put in jail. And in my opinion, it is critical that you don't do that, right? So make sure you have permission. And we're going to talk about in a second some ways that you can test to learn, right? Because that's the big question. Okay, if I have to get permission, but I don't know how to do it, how do I learn how to do it? How do I get to that point? Well, it's pretty simple. There's a 3-step process. It's actually 3 very, very long steps. We want you to understand, we want you to grow, and we want you to practice, okay? And I want to be very clear. I can't even do the math. 27 years, maybe. No, that's not. Yeah, 20, whatever it is. I've been testing and learning and understanding since 1991. I can't believe I can't do that math. Yeah, 27 years. I started as a developer, as a small company. I was working in Delray. Not anybody knows where Delray is, but Delray, Florida. And I was working with this company as an admin, as a developer. I also did administration for them. I ran their network. I managed their bulletin board system. Yes, I'm that old. Man, they were awesome. We had 14.4 modems. And I'm hoping somebody in the audience is as old as I am and got that. The first step to being an ethical hacker is understanding technology. This is something I think that many people are missing today. We see way too many people. I do, right? We are hiring at SecurityIs. We have positions that we're trying to fill. And as is everybody, right? Everybody in the security field is hiring. I talk to people and I interview people and I have people apply that they took a class and now they're an ethical hacker, right? I had a kid just talking to me yesterday. I guess I can't call him a kid. He was like 26, but he was a kid to me. I was just talking to him the day before yesterday, and he is in college and just graduated college, and he has a computer science degree with a major focus or whatever they call it in information security. I'm like, well, that's great. What do you know about networking? What do you know about development? If I put some Python code in front of you, do you understand it? If I put some assembly in front of you, do you understand it? If I say that your Active Directory server is misconfigured, do you know how to reconfigure an Active Directory server? And what I find is that so many people today in the security field don't understand those basics. They've never done IT. And that's a failing, in my opinion. There's no way for you to be an effective security consultant, in my opinion, without having some tech background, right? Some type of background in doing what we're testing, right? I look at Mike Whitehorn-Gillum, one of my consultants, and he's been an application developer for 20 years or something. And when he tests a web application or a web API and he gets in there, he's able to talk to the developer in their language and understand each other and understand the reality of managing and developing an enterprise application. He's not just parroting security standards that OWASP said or NIST says or whatever. And I'm not saying that you have to have 20 years of development, but the first step to understanding security and how to be an ethical hacker is to understand how the systems work, because we call it being professionally evil. But what you want to be able to do is look at that normal functionality, that normal usage, the way that system works, and you want to be able to figure out where the weaknesses are. And if you don't understand the way the system works normally, it's going to be very difficult for you to understand where the weaknesses are, right? So that's the first step. That's the first process that you have to do, is you have to start understanding networking, application development, cloud computing. Start digging into this stuff. If you can't at work, do it at home, right? Download VirtualBox or install Hypervisor on your machine. And I only point those two products out because they're free, right? And I'm a cheap jerk, right? I'd rather get something that's free, but VMware works just as well. But install a virtualization software on your machine or in a lab and start building out stuff, right? All the major operating system vendors either provide their software for free or provide trial licenses or limited licenses for lab use, specifically for this kind of thing. You can download Windows 10 and Server 2027 or whatever. I made up that last number. install it and build a lab that mimics an organization, right? And play around with it, make it work. And then when we get to the next step, break it. Go out to Amazon, sign up for an AWS account. Go out to Azure, sign up for an Azure account. Go out to IBM, sign up for a Bluemix account, and start practicing in those environments, reading their documentation, learning how they work. And I will tell you right now, you are never going to stop doing this. This is an ongoing thing. You have to constantly be growing. It's actually one of the things I like about this field, is that we constantly have to learn new things. I constantly get presented with something like, hey, have you looked at this before? Oh man, no, I haven't. That's awesome. Let's play with it, right? So that's the first step. And I know it's a big one, right? But build that technology. Build that foundation of understanding of how systems really work. Then start to grow, right? Learn security. And I'll tell you right now, you've already started doing that. As you started to build out that Active Directory lab, as you started to play with AWS, and part of playing with AWS is working in the IAM system for authorization and authentication and identity management. You're going to start learning how permissions work. You're going to start learning how the systems are locked down and hardened. Building those systems, playing around in AWS still, you're going to start focusing on how security groups work. And as part of dealing with that, I'm sure that you're going to be like, wait a minute, I've lost track of where all these things are. How do I fix that? How do I map out what's here? Oh, well, there's this really cool tool called Cloud Mapper, released by Duo Security. It's free, open source. And you give it a set of credentials. Ooh, we can't give them hardcore credentials. So how do we do? Oh, we have to build a security audit user. Okay, so how do I do that? Then I learn how to work with that in IAM, and I build the policies and attach it to the user. And then I run Cloud Mapper, and it goes out, and it collects all the data, and it builds this pretty network map of all the security groups and all the EC2 instances and RDS instances and how they talk to each other and what's allowed to talk to what, right? It's an awesome tool, by the way. So you already started to learn security, but now let's start really focusing. And in my opinion, what you have to focus on is not learning tools, but learning techniques. We see too many times. I've sat through too many classes. I've taught classes that were tool focused. And don't get me wrong, tools are important. Understanding how Nmap works, Metasploit works, Burp Suite or Zap or whatever works is important. But more important than that is understanding how the techniques work. If you're playing around with Metasploit, but you don't understand what a buffer overflow does, and you don't understand how Meterpreter connects back to the system to provide that reverse shell to give you the access or run the Kiwi extensions or what have you, if you don't understand the technique, you're just clicking buttons or typing commands you read online. You're not a real hacker. Sorry, you're a script kiddie. And you don't want to be a script kiddie, right? So you want to learn the techniques. You want to understand what we do to test. You want to start poking, and we'll focus on websites right now, just as an example. You want to understand how we intercept the traffic and how we repeat it by manipulating the parameters that are submitted to that website so that we understand what goes on. We want to understand that when I put a single quote in and I get this error message back from the application, this is what that means. And that right there, my friends, is why I say that the first step was building technology. Because if you've never looked at how an application is built, even if you're not a developer, if you've never understood how the application works on the server, how the web server accepts the request and the module hands it back to an app server, and the app server processes it within the JVM, I'm just using an example, then it's very difficult for you to understand what injections you should try, right? So start learning testing techniques. There's classes you can take, PCB, there's a conference. Lots of organizations provide training. There's also lots and lots of information online, right? Heck, talk about websites. There is a 6-day class that's completely open source that you can go download and walk through right now, called the Professional Evil Web Pen Testing 101 course. And it's literally 6 days of materials, exercises and slides, all free, that you can pull down to learn testing techniques and some tool sets so that you can start focusing. Excuse me. You can start poking at this technology, this knowledge, this how to be a hacker, right? And then let's add the ethical part and understand the rules, right? Because again, I want to be very clear. What we do for a living, what I do every day as my job, is illegal in most places in the world, except for the fact that I have permission, right? If I did what I do, if I just picked a web application and said, ha ha ha, I'm going to hack that, right? I'm going to jail. But I understand what the rules are. I understand who I have to be authorized by. I have to have a signed contract. I have to have permission, and the person who gave me permission has to have the authority to give me that permission, right? This is not, years ago, I used to do forensics, and I was working a case, and this guy claimed that he had permission to hack the company website. And when he got poked at it, like, okay, explain. It was like, well, he talked to his coworker and said, hey, we should probably test this. And the coworker said, yeah, we probably should. And so they did. And they claimed that was permission because they had talked about it. Like, no. Is your coworker the owner of the company? Is your coworker a boss, a manager, somebody who has the authority to do that? The answer was no. Okay, well, that doesn't work, right? So understand how to get permission, how to work within the rules. And one of the things, we refer to it as the rules of engagement. Right? When we go to do a penetration test, let's say your company or yourself, right? I don't know, whatever. You were to hire Secure Ideas to do a pen test. Penetration test, or pen test for people who don't know, is an ethical hacking exercise. We are going to attempt to penetrate the target, whether it's your network, your web apps, your mobile apps, your users, whatever, right? We are going to first, after we scope it and negotiate that whole side, we are going to work out a rules of engagement. Okay, and the rules of engagement are going to say things like, what's the target? What's in scope, right? What am I allowed to test? Is there anything, now we know that if this is what's in scope, everything not listed is out of scope. But is there anything particular I have to make sure I stay away from, right? Like, for example, I was testing a power distribution and transmission system, right? And while the distribution transmission systems were in scope, this was a production system, right? This was literally the power transmission and distribution system for part of the United States. And so while that system was in scope, here are the 3, 4, 5 things I'm not allowed to touch during the testing, or I'm only allowed to touch with assistance from the staff, because those are production systems that could literally turn off power, right? So we know what's in scope, everything else is out of scope, but within the in-scope systems, here are the transactions or systems or ports or whatever that I have to either be careful of or not touch at all, okay? So we have that rules of engagement. Another part of the rules of engagement is, who's my contact? Who do I talk to if there's a problem, right? Who do I work with to ensure that I have the information I need and that I can communicate the vulnerabilities I find back to the system, right? So I need to understand that within the rules of engagement. And I'm going to give them my contact information just the same, so that if they have an issue, if they see something going on, they can reach back out to me and say, hey, Kevin, this is what's going on. Is this being caused by you? Did you by chance cause this issue? And the reason we do that is, no matter how careful we are literally hacking systems. That literal hacking can cause problems, right? And if we cause problems, we want to be able to fix them as fast as possible. We want to be able to make sure that we're not impacting the business negatively to the best of our ability. Okay, so we understand the rules of engagement. There's other things we can float around with the rules of engagement, right? For example, if we were testing a catalog system, a shopping cart system, you're not going to want to ship everything I buy, right? Because I'm just going to ship it back to you and return it. You're not going to want to process my orders completely. Okay, so we got to figure out a way to handle that, right? Maybe we have a test credit card that your system knows not to treat as a real order. Or maybe we set a specific name on the order so that on the back end, you're able to just, go back in after I'm done testing and reject all of those orders, right? I don't know, maybe, but that's all part of the rules of engagement. We're going to learn various tool sets, right? My recommendation is that you immediately, if you want to start doing this, right, after you get some basic knowledge base, basic tech knowledge, go download Samurai WTF, the web testing framework. This is a virtual machine that is focused on web and application testing. And go download Kali Linux, K-A-L-I. Linux. Kali Linux is a virtual machine that has security testing tools outside, not just web, right? Wireless, reverse engineering, network testing tools, right? That way you have these pre-built tool sets that you can make use of, right? And then as you're learning the testing techniques, right, you have the tools pre-built for you, ready to go, ready to deal with anything that you want. Okay, so now we've done 2 of the 3 steps. And again, you're never going to stop doing those 2 steps. Heck, let's be blunt. You're not going to stop doing any of the 3 steps. We work on these 3 steps every day of our lives, right? Every day that we wake up, we are doing 1 or more of these, usually all 3. Once you have the basic tech knowledge, once you have the testing techniques and the tool sets, and you understand the rules, you understand permissioning, you understand knowing what you're allowed to do, the next step is to find targets, right? And I don't mean do a Google search for what company can I hack today, right? I mean, that's a Google search you could do, but that seems to be ignoring the rules I've mentioned multiple times. But you have to have targets, right? It's just like I said earlier, that it's not enough to just, I read some books on technology, I want to be a hacker. You have to know how to build these things. You know how to manage them, know how to run the systems, know how to troubleshoot the systems, to build that tech knowledge base. The same thing goes with security. It's not enough to just say, oh, if I want to do a port scan, I'm going to run the nmap dash capital O for an operating system detection, and I'm going to do a dash lowercase s capital S, I think it is, for a SYN scan, right? Or I'm going to do a dash capital A to do a connect scan, a script scan, and a version detection and operating system detection, right? We can memorize command line arguments. But that's not really making you a hacker. That's making you a savant, I guess, at command line arguments. Script kidding. You have to actually do it. You have to actually run nmap and understand how it works and know that when it says the port is open, that means for TCP connections that it sent a SYN, got a SYN ACK back, right? So it knew the port was open. If it says that the port is closed, it means for a TCP connection that it sent a SYN, SYN, synchronization packet, and it got a reset back. And if it says filtered, you have to know that what that means is it sent out a SYN for TCP connections, and it got nothing back. Well, why did it get nothing back, right? What does that mean? Well, it means the port's not open and the operating system dropped the packet, or there's a firewall between you or some type of access control list between you and the service, that port that is dropping your packet, which means that the port may be open or may not be, right? That's what that means. So you have to think about that. You have to understand that. So to truly understand that is not just memorizing command line arguments, it's doing it. It's testing actual systems. Okay, well, how do we do that? Well, I've said it, I've got to say it again. We're going to do this within the rules. And the best place to do this is not, oh, I found a production system I'm going to test, or I went to my boss and got permission to practice against our website. Don't do that. There are lots of targets you can use that will help you. The first one, you know that lab I told you to build the technology base? Attack it. It's your lab. It's running on your system. It's your computer, right? And as long as you don't leak out of that lab, be careful with that, right? One thing that a lot of people end up doing is they're at work, they fire up the VMs, they start testing those VMs, but they mistype things and they're testing things that are actually out on the corporate network. Don't do that. What you want to do is you want to have your computer, and the way I do it is, and I'm a nerd, I have lots of computers. My main machine that has all the virtual machines, I disconnect from the network entirely. That way I've just got my operating system and the virtual machines I want to play with, right? And I attack them. And there is no chance, because the machine is completely disconnected, there is no chance I'm going to leak onto the corporate network, that I'm going to leak onto the internet and accidentally attack something I'm not supposed to attack. And you say, but Kevin, you told us to also learn cloud systems. Yes. So here's what you do. Build, we'll play with AWS. I'm going to use terminology from AWS because my infrastructure runs in AWS, so it's the one I'm most familiar with. Build a VPC that has security groups that allow inbound traffic only, right? So that you can only get to it. Put a bastion host in there that you connect into that is your attack system, the system that you launch the tools from, right? Kali and Samurai are both available as that you can build AMIs of them, EC2 instances of them, sorry. Put a Samurai system in there, right? And then connect into it. And since you're only allowing inbound to that machine, you can't accidentally leak out of that machine, right? And you can test everything inside that VPC. You can test those targets that you've built. So that's your first set of practice targets, right? These lab systems that you were learning technology on. Use them. Then another one is there are practice targets available. For example, I mentioned Samurai WTF. I will admit my bias. I am the creator of Samurai WTF. Now with a team of people, you know, Jason Gillum, Mike Whitehorn, Gillum, Justin Searle, a number of people helping us out with that. But inside of Samurai WTF are vulnerable applications, pre-built and ready to be tested. Dojo Basic, DVWA, Matilda, BWAP, Choose Shop, all target applications that you can play with. And the really nice thing about these target applications is, one, they're already completely documented by other people as to where the vulnerabilities are, so that you can, as you're learning, you could read some of these walkthroughs or whatever. But also, I mean, Jeremy Druin, the author of Matilda, he's constantly releasing YouTube videos teaching you how to attack the system he built and explaining how those vulnerabilities work, all available for free on YouTube, right? Adrian Crenshaw, Iron Geek, he has an entire collection of videos from conferences around the world that he's got up on how to attack and test things, right? So you have these practice targets, but not just these, not just, hey, I was able to hack that. Many of them have the ability to increase their security level, right? When you look at DVWA and Matilda, they both have functions where you can say, hey, turn on a web app firewall, or make the vulnerabilities harder to exploit, or make it more difficult to get past the controls, right? So as you learn, you increase the difficulty to learn more, to make yourself better, to continue to improve. And then as you really get good at this, as you start to really practice with these targets. I recommend there's capture the flag events, CTF events that you can go to, conferences you can go to that run CTFs. There are some CTFs that are online that give you practice environments. Once you've gotten to the point where you feel comfortable with your skill set, and let's be clear, if you're like most people, you are never going to feel that you're good enough. Okay, we're not saying that you're perfect. But once you get to the point where you say, you know what, I have a good tech knowledge base. I've really, really learned security testing techniques. I understand the tools. I understand what I can do, what I can't do. I understand how things work. And I've practiced the heck out of it, right? I've really, really focused on how these things happen, and I've learned all of the tools I can, and I'm constantly learning new things. Then start evaluating whether or not you want to go do a bug bounty. And bug bounties are interesting. These are systems, HackerOne, BugCrowd, whatever, right? There's private ones as well, where an organization has said, hey, you know what? We believe that our security is pretty mature, so we're going to put a bounty on it. And we're going to tell people they can test this, this, and this. And if they find a flaw, we will reward them. Maybe we'll send them a t-shirt. Maybe we'll pay them $150,000. But a bug bounty gives you real world systems, real applications, and vulnerabilities that are unknown that you can go try to find. And you can practice with them. Now, my recommendation is don't get involved with bug bounties until you actually understand how to hack, how to do this type of testing. And the reason is, I see way too many people involved in bug bounties that they shouldn't even be allowed on a computer. So, one of the nice things about the bug bounties is if you get good at it, you can get invited to bigger bounties. You can also get a job doing this. I'll tell you right now that, you know, if you followed these techniques and these steps, and you came to me and said, hey, Kevin, I think I'm ready. I want a job. You have a way better chance of having me look at your resume, and interview you than if all you did was go take a college class on how to hack or some ethical hacking class with no background. And I'm not saying don't take those classes, right? I do those classes. I think they're good. I just don't think you can go take an ethical hacking class and then turn around and say you're a hacker. You have to have all of this. You have to build up to the system. Practice, learn, enjoy. Because I'll tell you right now, I love my job. I really do. I tell people all the time that I have the best job in the world. I get to play with things everywhere. I get to see how to break them. I get to do puzzles day in and day out to understand what the systems do, to understand how to break them in an attempt to make them better. The goal is to be better. And I get to do that every day. It never gets old. I giggle and laugh and enjoy myself constantly. And I hope that you get to as well. That's this. I'll turn it over so we can hear some about this, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Thank you, Kevin, for this very insightful and practical presentation. I want to inform you that PCB will exclusively introduce the ethical hacking course training in the PCB Insights Conference that will be held in October in France, Paris. A PCB certificate in that course will exemplify your dedication in managing ethical hacking processes and frameworks, and most importantly, you will be recognized worldwide. For more information about this course and its introduction, please visit our website www.pcb.com. Now, without further ado, we will go ahead and take some time to answer some of the questions from the attendees regarding today's session. The first question is, how can I ensure that I did not break down or crash our system during ethical hacking process?
Good question. So you can't. No, I'm just kidding. That is one of the main reasons why I say that you have to understand the techniques and you have to understand the system you're testing. If you do, if you understand what the technique is doing and you understand how the systems work, it is much less likely that something's going to crash or cause a problem. Please note, I did not say it is impossible. It still can happen. So what we do while we're testing is we constantly keep monitoring the system. Now, either if we're internal and working with the staff directly, right, we let them know what systems we're testing and they're watching the systems, resources, and stuff like that as we test. If we're external or we don't have that connectivity, what we do is we monitor the system itself. So for example, if we're testing a web application, as we're attacking it, we have another system that's separate that regularly is exercising transactions to make sure that those transactions are still functioning, right? Now, having said that, IT systems are very complex. It is possible that we're attacking a web application or some system here that has 2 or 3 different back-end systems, and one of those back-end systems breaks. We can't tell from our side until a transaction fails, right? So that's why you have to make sure you understand what you're testing, and you have to understand, remember in the rules of engagement, we have those contacts back and forth, so that they are looking and watching. But it boils down to, if you understand the systems you're attacking and you understand the techniques, please note, I keep saying techniques, not tools. If you understand the techniques, even if you're using an automated tool, you understand what it's doing, there's a much less likelihood of you causing problems.
Thank you, Kevin. Now another question is, do the same principles of ethical hacking apply to any electronic device, like per se phones?
So there's one exception that I would say, but yes, I talk about networks and web apps and mobile apps and embedded systems and what have you, but from a technology perspective, whatever technology you're testing, you're going to test using these 3 things will work, right? Learn how they work, learn what they do normally, learn the security aspects of them, the risks, right? Understand what a risk of a phone is compared to a web application, and then practice and learn how to do the security testing of it. The one exception is there are certain things, and I'm not a lawyer, but in some areas, some places, some things are illegal. Like for example, in the United States, we are not allowed to intercept cellular communications, right? With very few exceptions. So I can't just attack the CDMA network, right? That's against the law. So you have to worry about some things like that. There are also some intellectual property laws, reverse engineering laws that if you were to attack an embedded system, you may be violating those laws. I'm not even going to attempt to outline what those laws are and how they could be impactful. That's a conversation for you and your lawyer. But that's the only exception. Everything else is the same.
Thank you, Kevin. Another question is, should candidates put on their resume any black hat activities related to hacking if these activities build very strong knowledge on a lot of fields?
Sorry. One, you shouldn't have black hat activities. Okay. If you have black hat activities, you've already ignored what I said about rules. Now, I'm going to assume that it happened before you watched this webcast. So the answer is, God, no. Let me ask you a question. If you were applying for a police department, would you write about how you used to shoplift because it gave you an understanding of how shoplifting works? So as a police officer, you'd be better able to detect shoplifters? No, of course not. So my recommendation is, if you ignored the idea of rules, don't list black hat activities. You shouldn't have any, but don't list them.
Thank you, Kevin. Now, because of the time limitation, we will only answer one more question. How do I show an organization what I can do for them in terms of security without breaking the rules of their systems?
So you shouldn't be testing their systems at all, unless they ask you to, right? If an organization, and I have seen some organizations that do interviews and stuff like that, where they'll set up a target system and say, go after that. The way to show them is to be involved in the community, right? We talked about practicing and being part of CTFs and bug bounties. If you've competed in 20 CTFs and done well, and you've done 100 bug bounties and submitted things, that's all proof of work, right? That's stuff you can show. The reality, though, is a good company who is interviewing or working with you to bring you on board, they're going to ask you questions and talk to you about technology and techniques. And that's how you're going to show them that you're good at stuff. That's the best.
Well, thank you, Kevin, again for this great session. And thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. I would like to let you know that this webinar will be recorded and posted on our website as well as on our YouTube channel, together with the slides of the presentation. Once again, for more information about the conference or our training courses, please visit our website, www.pcb.com. Thank you all and have a great day.